All right, now that we have our bags set up, I'm just gonna go over that again, just to review what should be in your bags before we continue. So you should have 4 bags. And at this point, we're going to label those bags because from here on in, it will make a difference as to what bag is used for what, because we're gonna be putting some panels in here next, and each panel is gonna be designated different numbers. So we're gonna go ahead and label our bags. So one is gonna be panel 1. The second one will be panel 2. The third will be panel 3. And the fourth will be panel 4. So important to have those labels on your bag at this point. I just used a Sharpie. You can use masking tape or a label, it doesn't matter how you label those. So right now, every bag has exactly the same thing in it. So I'm just gonna go through that at this point. So in your bag, you should have, I'm just gonna move these to the side. So panel, let's just have my panel 1 bag, but they're all gonna be the same. So in your bag, you should have 9 papers that say Unit A1, 9 that say Unit A2, 9 that say Unit A3, 9 that say Unit A4, and 9 that say Unit A5. So that should be in, should have that in all of your bags. So we're gonna stack that back up. And you can see here that I have used a paper clip just to hold my papers together, just so that they're not all flying around in your bag. And you won't have to resort them when you take them out of there. So besides that, you should have your sashing fabric, which we cut. That was your 18 strips that we just finished cutting, that we cut in half. We put a template layout sheet on it, and it has a paper clip in each section. That should be in your bag as well. So this and these papers should be in every one of those 4 bags. So if you are there and you have that done, we're going to continue with our panels next. So for this pattern, I talked about at the beginning that we're using 4 of the Dream Big panels. In your kit, you'll notice that you have 5 panels actually, and that 5th one, we debated about putting that in there. We decided to put it in there because if you make a mistake at some point in this pattern, there's no forgiveness to this pattern. So if you make a mistake, you need that 5th panel to go and find that exact piece of fabric and cut it out and use it where you've made the mistake. So that's why we've done that. If you happen to not need that panel, we're going to give you some great ideas at the end of the class here on how to use that panel with this project at the end. So at this point, you're going to take 4 of those panels that you have in your kit. And the important thing is here that we have them all the same way when we label them. So the best reference point is the selvage edge. So the edge that has Dream Big, it has Hoffman on it. It's the only edge that has writing on it. We're going to use that as a reference point. It doesn't matter where you put it, as long as it's the same on all 4 panels, and then we label our panels all the same. Because if you rotate this panel differently for all of them, they're all slightly different because the petals are not the same all the way around in the flower. So we're going to take this panel, and we're going to put the selvage with the writing on the left hand side. So we're going to label this one panel 1. So I'm going to take a label, and I'm not going to put this right up in the corner because we're going to be squaring this panel, so I don't want to put it where I'm going to lose it. So I'm going to put it about right there, but you want it in the top left corner. So we're going to label our panels all the same way. The writing on the left hand side, the label at the top left of your panel. So I'm just going to make my labels here for the other 3. So you're going to have a panel 2, panel 3, and panel 4. So I'm going to take my other ones. So again, I'm making sure that my selvage is on the left-hand side of me, and I'm going to take a label and I'm going to put a panel 2 on that one. And then my third one will be the same thing. So again, selvage, the writing on the selvage is to my left. And I'm going to put panel 3, the top left. And my fourth again, the label will be at the top left. Writing is to my left on the selvage. So right now I know that my 4 panels are sitting exactly the same, so I can twist and turn these now a little bit, but I still know that this is to my left, and my sticker is what's going to become very important because we're going to be squaring off at this point and we're going to lose our selvage. So that's why we have to label these before we square them off. This way we know that our panels are all sitting the same way. So I'm just going to move these 3 back to my chair. Okay, so I've got panel 1 here. So to square this, there are numerous ways you can do this. If you have a huge mat, you don't have to do as much folding, but for the purpose of this class, and because most people will just have this size of a mat at home, a 24 by 36 mat at home, I'm going to do it to show you how to do it with the smaller mat. But you can definitely do it with less folding if you have bigger cutting surface. So I'm just going to fold this in half. So I'm just putting my selvages together, and of course the selvage edges are not going to be too square. So what you want to make sure here is that you don't have any creases or ruffles in here, and make this as close as you can, as straight as you can, because you can see here it's very wavy. And then I'm going to fold it again in half the other way. So I basically have this folded right now in quarters. And again, you want to make sure that you've got it. So your 2 folds should be directly one on top of the other at the bottom. And then these edges are not going to line up, and that's why we're going to square this off. So we're going to be squaring off the selvage edges. So I am going to turn this so that I have the full fold is on the bottom and the 2 stacked folds are to my left. And I'm going to use a 15.5 inch square for this and an 8.5 inch by 24 inch rectangle. So we're squaring these off to 42 inches square. So we want a 42 by 42 inch square when we're done. We've folded this in quarters, so that means we need to measure this to 21 inches, which is half of 42. So the easiest way to figure out, because we're using 2 rulers here, is just take the 21 minus the long ruler that you're cutting against. So 21 minus the 8.5 is going to give you 12.5 inches. So the 12.5 and the 8.5 is going to be equal to 21 inches. Okay, so that's how I figured that out. If you have a 6.5 inch ruler, you would just do 21 minus the 6.5, which gives you 14.5. Okay, but mine is 8.5, so that means I'm going to put my 12.5 inch line on the fold of my ruler, of my panel. And I'm also going to put the 12 and a half, my 12 and a half inch line on the bottom fold. So right in this corner right here, you should have your 12 and a half inch line right here. And if you want to make sure, you're just going to count that out to make sure, because once you've cut this, you've committed. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and my half up this way, and the same thing this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and a half, plus my half on my ruler here is going to give me 13, and then 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So I've got my 21. So that's another way that you can double check to make sure you're cutting what you need. So we need 21 inches this way. So once you're all nice and square, you're just going to butt this up nice and tight, and we're going to grab our cutter and we're going to cut all the way up. And then we're going to cut the other way. So I already had my 12 and a half set this way. I'm adding 8 and a half on this side now. And this is where, if you can rotate your mat, definitely do that, or walk around your table. And I'm going to cut that. So I now have a nice square that's 42 by 42. So you can see why I put my sticker here. I didn't want to cut it off when I was cutting off my selvage edge. And now you don't know which side has the writing on anymore, or you will lose that side once you get going here. So what we want to do now is cut a 6-inch strip off the right side of panel number 1. So this is our panel number 1. We're going to cut a 6-inch strip off the right side of our panel. Okay, so I am going to, so not to get you confused by twisting this panel around, I am just going to leave it exactly like it's supposed to be here. Your panel number 1 label is at the top left. We want to cut a 6-inch strip off the right. So I'm just going to use a 2-ruler method to cut this. So I'm going to put my square ruler. I am going to put my 6-inch line of my square ruler on the edge, the right edge of my panel. So we've got 6 inches, and then I'm going to take my long ruler and butt it up against my square. And again, just double check that you're nice and square down here as well, which we are. So 6 inches, butt this one up against. We're just going to move this one away, and we're going to cut. Okay, so once we have this first 6-inch strip cut off, we're going to label that, and you're going to use a red pen for this one, and it's going to be panel 1 and its right side border, and you're going to make a red star on that one, and you're going to put it at the bottom of your border, so down here. Okay. So we're going to this aside for right now, so we're just going to pile those right there. Okay, so our next cut is going to be a 6-inch strip on the bottom of this panel. So that means that we have to, so this is still the way it was, so we want to fold this the other way. So this is our top. So we're going to fold this in half this way. So I'm going to make it so that my label's on top. So your label should be at the bottom left right now, on the left side of your panel. And make sure it's right one on top of the other. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to cut a 6-inch strip off the bottom. So this one's going to be shorter. Our first one is going to be 6 inch by 42. This one is going to be 6 inches by 36. So same thing, we're going to take 6 inches off of our square. Put it on the right hand side of your panel. So you should have 6 inches here. And then you're going to butt up your long ruler against that square and just make sure you're square up on your fold. Move this away and cut this one. We're going to take our rulers away. So we want to label, so we're going to take this strip, open it up, and we're going to label this end of our strip, and this one is going to be labeled in yellow. So this one's going to say panel 1, bottom, and you're going to have a yellow star on this one. And this is going to go right here. So again, we're just going to fold this up and put it with our other one that we just finished cutting. So we'll just put that to the side for now. All right, so now that we have our panel cut, we've cut off the right and the bottom borders off of this one. We have a 36 by 36 inch square. So now what we want to do is cut the rest of this panel into 9 12-inch squares. So to not get mixed up again here, we're going to first of all make sure that your panel 1 label is still at the top left, so that we're going to start cutting that way. And we're going to label our 9 blocks right away so that we don't get them twisted as we're going. So I'm just going to take my pen, and you're going to make labels for, let's say, 1, 3, 5, 13, 15, 17, 25, 27, and 29. And make sure that you put a line under your 1 to know that it's right side up this way. Okay, so there's going to be a few numbers like that. Your 6 is another one, and your 9. So the numbers that you can be read upside down either way or differently for the 6 and the 9. You have to make sure that you know which one's right side up. So my 1, I'm putting a line underneath it so that I know that when it's sitting like this, it's right side up. If my line's on top, I know my block's upside down, etc. Okay, so I'm going to label this. So I'm just kind of guessing here my 12 inches. This is going to be 3, 5, 13, 15, 17, 25, 27, and 29. So I'm just guessing. I'm going to move these as I'm cutting to make sure they're in the right block. So what I'm going to do, because I'm still 36 inches long and my mat is just 24 inches high, I'm just going to fold this in half. So again, my panel number 1 labels at the top left. So I'm just going to fold this in half, like this. And I'm going to cut 3 12-inch strips. Jeez. Did you see that? Okay, so I have my square is not going to be quite long enough, but I can use my square and my 8.5. So that means I need 3.5 inches from my square ruler. So 3 and 8 is 11 plus 2 halves is going to give me 12. So again, you want to make sure you're straight on the bottom here. So my 3.5 is on the left edge of my panel, and I'm going to grab my cutter. So I'm going to cut, and I'm going to cut another 12-inch strip across. I'm just going to pull this one away slightly. And again, I'm going to put my 3.5-inch line on the left of the remaining panel and butt my long ruler up against that. Make sure I'm square on the bottom. So I should have 3 12-inch strips. I'm just going to make sure. And we do. So we have 3 12-inch strips at this point. So I'm just going to move these two over, and I'm going to open this one up. And I'm going to cut 12 inches across. Again, now I just need my square ruler this time. So I'm going to make sure I've got 12 inches, and it should be nice and square. Make sure that my label's underneath my ruler. And again, 12 inches. So again, I have my second labels underneath my ruler, and this one should be 12 as well, and it is. So these 3 squares are done. So we have 5, 17, and 29. So we know that they go this way because that's the way my numbers, they're read right side up. So depending on what you're using for labeling, I know that my labels don't stick very well, so I am going to add a pin to my labels. Extremely important that these labels do not come off, because once they fall off, you don't know which way to put them back on. You don't, because it's going to be very difficult unless you put your panel back together again. Like the whole panel back together again, you won't know which way that label is supposed to be up. So make sure that those labels are very secure on your square. So I'm just going to pin that like that, and I'm just going to stack these up. And I'm just going to put that to the side, and then I'm going to do the same thing with my remaining 2 strips. So again, we're just squaring. And that one is 12 as well. So again, make sure that your labels are going to stay on. So I'm just going to pin mine. So this one goes like this. Put those ones aside, and we'll do the same thing with our last strip. So, and that's why we pin them. So easy for me to tell right now which way it's supposed to be, but if I would just have a block, a random block that I'm pulling out of my bag and that label would be off, it would not be easy to tell which way it's supposed to be. So once you have your 12-inch block cut, make sure you pin those labels down. Alright, so we've got these last 3 blocks are cut. So again, I'm going to pin these on. So now you can take all of these blocks, so these 9 12-inch blocks that we've just cut are going to go into your panel 1 bag. Okay, so you'll find that bag, and you're just going to, you can just fold these in half if you want, just loosely, and we're going to put that in there. So this bag is ready. Everything that we need to create the blocks in this bag are, everything is in this bag to do that. So we're just going to put this bag to the side, and we're going to repeat the process 3 more times with our 3 remaining panels. So I am going to take a break and get rid of the ladybugs, because we now have 3 floating around here. There's one here. All right, we're going to continue squaring off our panel. So I'm going to grab my panel number 2. So again, you want to make sure that your panel number 2 label is at the top left of your panel at this point. And we're just going to fold this in half the best that we can, because it's definitely not going to match up at the top here. So the important thing is that it's laying flat. And you kind of have to fudge that center because it's going under and over here. So once you have it set up this way, we're going to fold it in half again this way. So you want to make sure your two folds are one on top of the other here. And your two selvage edges are not going to line up. Okay, so I'm going to rotate this way so that I can cut. So we are cutting, we want to square this off to 42 by 42. I've got it folded in quarters, so that means I want to square it to 20. I want to use 21 as my measurement. So we're going to need 12 and a half on my square ruler. So I'm going to put the 12 and a half on my bottom fold as well as on my left hand fold. So I'm making sure this is nice and square. So your 12 and a half should be right in the corner of your panel. And 12 and a half here and 12 and a half down here. And then I'm going to take my 8 and a half inch ruler and butt that up. Make sure we've got all of our layers here. And we're going to cut. Okay, then without moving my square, I'm just going to take my 8 and a half inch ruler and move it to the other side. So just double check that you've got 12 and a half down here. Butt that up, and we're going to cut that cut. So if you can walk around your table, you can do that. Or rotate your mat. I can't do that easily at this station, so I'm just doing it that way. All right, so now we have a 36 by 36 inch, or a 42 by 42 inch square, sorry. And what we're going to do now is fold your panel in half so that your panel number 2 label is at the bottom left of your 42 by 42 inch square. And the first cut you're going to make is going to be a 6-inch strip off the bottom of the panel. So you're going to take your square. I'm just not rotating my panel here because I don't want to confuse you. So the 6-inch goes on the right side of your panel, which is now the bottom because my label is up here, the top left. I'm going to butt up my 8 and a half. So I've got 6. I'm going to move this away and I'm going to cut. So this is going to be your 6 by 42 inch strip off the bottom, and you're going to label that with your red marker, and that is going to say panel 2 bottom border, and you're going to put a red heart on that corner, and that's going to go down on this side of your border, and we're going to put that to the side. And what we're going to do now is we're going to cut a 6-inch strip off the left side of panel number 2. So we're cutting it on this side for panel number 2. So we're going to take our long ruler and we're just going to put the 6-inch line on the left side of our panel. And we're going to take that slice off. And we're going to grab our labels and our yellow pen. And this one is going to be labeled panel 2, left side border. And that one's going to have a yellow heart. So if you're finding that your yellow marker is not going to be dark enough for you, feel free to use a different color, just as long as there's 2 colors. You could use green or you can use blue, just as long as you can read what you're doing here. This one I find it hard to read, so I'm just going to make this heart green so you can see it as well. And that's going to go on the bottom of that strip. So that's going to go to the side as well for our borders. So we now have a 36 by 36 inch square once again. So again, we want to make sure that our panel number 2 sticker is at the top left before we start here, before we start cutting this up. And again, we're going to cut this into 9 12-inch squares. So we're going to take your labels again. And you're going to need numbers 2, 4, 6, 14, 18, you need 16, 26, 28, and 30. And again, make sure you put a line underneath your 6 so that you know that it's a 6, not a 9. Okay, so it's right side up. And again, I'm just going to place these so that they're approximately in the middle of my 9 squares, so that when I'm cutting, I don't get mixed up as to the orientation of my blocks. 14, 16, 18, 26, 28, and 30. And again, I'm just reaffirming, I'm just using my pattern here. On page 2 of my pattern, you have a chart that tells you where these numbers go. So you can see that they're in order, so going from smallest to biggest as we're going along. But that is in the chart diagram too in your pattern. So just follow that. So now we're going to go ahead and cut across 12 inches. So we're going to have 3 rows of 12 inches. So again, before you start cutting, you want to make sure that you're folded exactly in half. Let your fabrics exactly one on top of the other on the edges here. So I'm going to use my 2 rulers again here, because I need 12 inches. So I'm going to use 3.5. So I'm going to put my 3.5 inch line on the left side of my panel, plus my 8.5 is going to give me 12 inches. And again, I'm making sure I'm nice and square down on the bottom. this one should be 12 inches, which I'm going to double check right away, and it is. Okay, so now I'm just going to move 2 of my panels to the side here, making sure that my labels aren't going to fall off. Let me see that one has already. So you're going to open this up, and now I'm just going to use my square to cut 12 inches across. So you want to make sure your label is underneath your ruler. Make sure you're not cutting through a label. One should be 12 as well, and it is. Okay, so I am going to pin my labels on because mine are falling off. Because you really don't want these falling off. I'll put that to the side, and then I'll do the same thing to this one. So you can see here that I've lost a label for my middle square. So if I just refer back to my diagram number 2, if I look at the very first column of my diagram, it says I should have 2, 14, and 26 here. So I'm just going to make another label that says 14. So again, this is the reason why we pin those labels on, so that they don't fall off for you. Okay, so again, we're going to cut 12 inches across this strip. So I'm going to just check this one, and then I'm going to pin my labels on. And we've got 12. Oops, wrong one. Okay, so once we've got our 9 squares cut, labeled, and pinned, we're just going to stack them up, fold them in half lightly, and put those into our panel 2 bag. And that bag's ready to go. So we're now going to do our panel number 3. So again, we have our label at the top left. Salvage is at the side, left side. So to square this up, we're just going to fold this in half. Okay. So I now have a 42 by 42 inch square, and I am going to put my panel so that my label's at my top left. And what we want to do is cut the top border first. So we're going to fold this in half this way. So that means that your label should be at the top right hand side right now. And we're going to cut a 6-inch strip. So if I think this is going to be in the way here, I'm just going to move this down a little bit. Okay, so again, I am just going to take my square and my 8.5. So I'm going to put my 6-inch line on the right hand side of my panel. And butt my long ruler up against that, and it should be nice and square on the bottom. Move that away. And cut that. So this one is going to be 6 inches by 42 inches. And we want to label this end. And that one's going to say top, panel 3, top border. And with a red pen, we're going to make a red circle. Like that. And we're going to put that right there. So these ones too, you can pin them on if you feel they're going to fall off. Put that to the side. And now we need to cut the right hand side of panel number 3. So we're going to fold this back this way so that we have our panel 3 label is now at the top left again. And again, you want to make sure this is lined up. Just move this over. And I'm going to use my 2 rulers again. So again, 6-inch on the right edge of your panel, and got your 8.5-inch ruler. nice and square down here. Move this one away. And cut. And this one we're going to label at the top, and that one's going to say panel 3 right side border. And instead of yellow, I'm going to use green so you can see this better. And again, it's just going to be a circle. And this is going to go right there. And I'm going to pin that on. And put that to the side. Okay, so now we have a 36" by 36" square again. So now we're going to grab our labels and we're going to mark our numbers down again. So for this panel we need 7, 9, 11, 19, 21, 23, 31, 33, and 35. And again, we have, for the 11 here, make sure you put a line underneath it so that we know that that's right side up, as well as your 9. So 2 numbers on this one that could be upside down or right side up. So again, we're going to just place these approximately in the middle of our 12" squares that we're going to cut. So we're going to open this up and we're going to put a 7, a 9, 11, 19, 21, 23, 33, 31, 33, and 35. Okay, hopefully they'll stay on this time. So we're just going to fold this in half. And we're going to cut 3 12" strips across this panel. So make sure you're nicely lined up on your sides. And again, I have to use 2 rulers here, so I'm going to use my 15" ruler and put the 3.5" line on the left hand side of my panel. So that's 3.5. And 8.5 is going to give me 12. And we're nice and square on the bottom. And then we're going to cut. So now we're going to grab our last panel, panel number 4. So same thing, we want to have our panel number 4 label, top left hand corner. And then we're going to fold in half. So we now have a 42 by 42 inch square for our panel. So what we want to do now is cut a 6-inch strip off the left hand side of your panel first. So for this one I just need to use the one ruler. So I'm just going to cut the 6-inch strip, which is going to be 6-inch on the left-hand side of your panel. And always double check this on your diagram, because you cut one side before you cut the other. So make sure you're cutting the right side off first. So for panel 4, you want to cut the left-hand side off first. So we've got 6 inches. And we're going to label that one with our red marker. And it's going to be panel 4. Left side border, and we're going to use a red square for this one. And that's going to go at the top here. Okay. So now we want to cut, I'm just going to put that aside with the other ones, and I will pin this on so it doesn't fall off. Now we want to cut a strip off the top, so I'm going to fold this way so that my panel 4 label is at the top right hand side here. So again, you want to make sure this is folded right in half. I'm going to use my 2 rulers for this one. So you're going to put the 6-inch line now on the right hand side of your panel. Through my label here, so I'm going to move this down over here. I'm using the wrong ruler. Make sure you use your smaller ruler, your shorter ruler for this. Put your 6-inch on the right hand side with your smaller ruler, and then butt your long one up against that one. So 6-inch on the right side, and this should be nice and square down here. My ruler away and then cut, and we're going to label the top with I'm going to use green instead of yellow, and this is going to be panel 4 top border, and we're going to put a square on that one as well. So these symbols that we've been using for labeling for the borders is so that we can actually merge those borders together as well around the panel, just to make it easier for you to do the borders after we're done doing the center. So again, I'm just going to pin that, put that to the side. We now have our 36 by 36 inch square, and we're going to now cut 3 12-inch strips across that panel. So again, we're going to start with our label, top left hand corner. Before we do that, we're going to label put our numbers on our panel. So for panel 4, we're going to need 8, 10, 12, 20, 22, 24, 32, 34, and 36. I think those are all good. So we've got 8, 10, 12, 20, 22, 24, 32, 34, and 36. So now we're going to fold our panel in half. Our panel number 4 label is at the top left-hand corner. And we're just going to cut 12 inches across. So I'm going to need my 2 rulers for that again. So we're going to do the 3.5 inch on the left side of the panel. 3.5 plus 8.5 is going to give us 12 inches. Okay, so now that we've got our last blocks cut, I'm just going to finish pinning my labels on. And we'll take all of our blocks and put them into our last bag, which is panel 4 bag. All right, now that we have our 4 bags filled with what we need to sew our project with, you're now going to take the strips, the 6-inch strips that we've cut and labeled for our borders, and take a 5th bag, and we're just going to label this one borders. And again, you'll notice that I have they're labeled and they're pinned, so if your labels are not going to stay on, pin them on so that you know what's what when we get to that part of the quilt. So you're just going to stick these into your border bag. And put that with the other bags. And at this point, we are ready to start sewing our Flower Through Lattice project.